Hi, it's me again, Jennifer, and I'm back to do sort of a weekly wrap up. I wanted to start by talking about the crafty projects that I'm either in the middle of or maybe some that I've even finished this week. And then I'm going to talk about the books that I'm either, again, reading or have just finished. What you don't know about me yet, if you're watching this channel, is that I'm very crafty. I knit, I embroider, occasionally crochet, do a little painting, usually in kind of a crafty way. So those things will also be making an appearance on my channel just because these are things that I love. And I wanted to start with my embroidery journal. So I decided this year to do something that I saw other people doing on like Instagram and Pinterest, and I just thought it was really cool. And it's essentially a journal, but with embroidery. For some people, they actually embroider a little doodle every single day, I think, or at least most days. I decided that that was just too much. So instead, I've decided to split up the year into 12 sections, actually by astrological sign. My plan is to do a flower for each section and then put in some things that relate to what was going on in my life, journal-like, for that time period. So this is where I am so far. This is sort of what I was working on today, which is that little row of hearts for Valentine's Day, of course. The flower is a snowdrop. And we've got a little knitted hat right here because I've done a bunch of little knitted, not little hats, but hats the last few weeks. And then we've got the big snail. And that's for my snails. I've got a bunch of snails in my aquarium, which I'm really fond of. They're actually some of my favorite creatures, so I decided to put a snail in there. I also have finished off with a couple pairs of socks the last week. One of them was for me. I actually finished a pair of socks and these I knit in Cascade Heritage yarn, which is really lovely. The color is fuchsia. If my editing skills are up to par, then you're gonna see a picture of them probably about right here, right now. And I used a pattern called Wonderment from Ravelry. Ravelry is a social media site and also acts as a place to store your projects. It's like a little online journal, let's say, that you can use. So, but it also is a repository for patterns and etc. So it's a free pattern that I found on Ravelry. This pair of socks was my second time knitting it because I also made a pair of socks for my dad in the same pattern. And then I made another pair of socks for my partner, Kevin. Same pattern, the Wonderment pattern, very different yarn. This one is called Biscotti and it's actually an ombre, which is why the socks are two different colors because I usually work my socks 2 at a time magic looping. So one sock was knit from the inside of the ball and the other sock was knit from the outside of the ball. He left the house wearing them this morning, so I think he liked them. I hope he did. But so those are my knitterly projects for the week that I finished off. I did start a tiny little pair of baby socks last night, and we'll see how they go. It's for my friend Catherine's baby, who's 4 months old, I think now. I have a hard time keeping track of that, but they're gonna be pink. They're in the leftover yarn from my own fuchsia socks, so hopefully they turn out fine and still fit her. Let's see. So now I want to talk about the books that I'm working on this week. And actually, I finished a few this week. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Shards of Earth, but I'm also going to do a longer video on that. So I finished Shards of Earth by Adrian Tchaikovsky. It's the first book in a trilogy. It is really good. I will say it was really propulsive. I was never bored. It's sci-fi. It's set far in the future, in a future where the Earth no longer exists. Humans are basically mostly kind of nomadic. And then there's an alien danger that comes back, and humanity has to deal with that. Like I said, I'm going to do a longer video on that book. It was really good, though. I also started and finished the Bromance Book Club this week. By the way, all of these books that well, these two books anyway, are actually from my shelves. They're from my Kindle shelves. I have about 300 unread books on my Kindle, unfortunately, and these were two of them. So I've actually owned the Bromance Book Club for quite a while, several years now. I think I probably bought it not too long after it came out. It's a romance, as you might guess from the title, and it's a second chance romance, which is fun. I mean, most of the time romance novels, I feel like, you know, it's two young people who are falling in love for the first time. That's not what this book is. This book is two pretty young people, but they've been married for 3 years. They've got 2 kids. And things are going poorly. So Gavin, the husband, is a professional baseball player. His wife, Thea, has told him to move out after he decided to give her the silent treatment for a month, and they're headed for divorce. But Gavin doesn't want that, so he doesn't decide. He goes to the hotel. He decides to get drunk for some period of time, and then his friends come over and they're like, look, buddy, this isn't going to work. This is definitely not going to get Thea back. So come with us. We're going to show you what to do. And that's where the Bromance Book Club comes in. They sober him up. They convince him to come to this meeting, and they bring out a Regency romance and they hand it to him. And they say, look, this is where you're going to get your plan. This is how you're going to figure out how to get your wife back. And he doesn't follow, like, it would be impossible for him to follow exactly what goes on in this Regency romance. And one of the fun things about the book is you do get chapters so there is a book within a book portion. So you get chapters from this fake Regency romance, which is really fun. And, as Gavin's reading this, he's like, well, in the beginning, he's like, this is silly and ridiculous. I don't know why I'm doing this. But his friends, and these are mostly other pro baseball players on his team, are like, no, really, look, let us explain to you how this works, how you should be learning to communicate better, figuring out what makes your wife tick, figuring out, like, what are the underlying causes of the reason why she kicked you out, right? And then, so he starts implementing some of these things. He starts in earnest to try to win Thea back. And we do get chapters also from Thea's perspective, where she talks about, Gavin's inability to communicate, and also how hard her childhood was because her dad is a serial philanderer who left her mom, and she's had a series of stepmoms, all of whom he cheated on, and so she doesn't trust people, and she particularly doesn't trust men, and so that is an issue that she has to work through. Not spoiling anything to say that there is a happily ever after here. It is, after all, a romance book, but this was very good. It was very well done. There are some scenes that are open door, but only a few, and if that were to make you uncomfortable, you could certainly skip them. It'd be really easy. It's not throughout the book. It's mostly towards the end when things are going better. But I really enjoyed it. It was really fun. I think I finished it in 2 days, so super fast. And then the other book that I just finished, actually right before starting this video, is Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine. And this was a book, actually an audiobook, that I checked out from the library. This is a book I've been meaning to read for a while. I actually thought I might have it on my Kindle, but I was wrong. And, you know, this is a tough book. I think this book was marketed as sort of quirky and funny. It's not really that. I mean, yeah, Eleanor is in some ways kind of quirky, definitely awkward. We don't really, I've seen some articles online and whatnot where people are like, well, she's clearly autistic. And I say, maybe she might be. That's never clearly defined in the novel. And what we do know about Eleanor is that she's suffered a really serious trauma. And you find out pretty early on that certainly she has suffered a very serious trauma, even though we don't know what it is. And that's one of the things, you know, what actually caused her trauma is one of the things that unravels throughout the book, and we do get the full story by the end of the book. But in the beginning, what you know is that she has a terrible burn scar on one side of her face, and that's it. She doesn't want to talk about it. She doesn't even necessarily know what happened, not the full story anyway. What we do learn about Eleanor right away, though, is that she is someone who is very lonely. She really clings to her routine. She has a very specific routine, which I think is why some people are like, well, clearly she's autistic. And again, maybe. But what I will say about this book is that as someone who has been very depressed at times in my life and had a really hard time functioning, it really touched me. And the parts of the book that deal with Eleanor's very severe mental illness, that deal with her dealing with her own trauma, really spoke to me. Like, I identified very strongly with her when she was absolutely at her worst. And that was rough. Honestly, it was a little rough. So, first of all, if you're going to read this book, it is not a quirky and funny book. It is a book that deals very specifically with someone who is not mentally well and has to deal with a serious and significant trauma. Now, I think I've rated this 5 stars already because it was really great. Eleanor does start connecting with people over the course of the book, and we know that it's been a really long time since she's done that, and that is what leads to her being able to confront and then deal with her trauma, and the way that she is able to connect with people and the way that they are able to show her through their care that she is a worthwhile person was the thing that just touched me to my core, I guess. So I really recommend it. I really enjoyed it. I think, you know, absolutely worth reading. All right, so I think that's it for today, at least. I'm gonna go do my best to edit this video, and I hope I do a good job of it. And if I do, you're probably gonna see this soon. All right, thanks. Bye.